public scoping meeting for the I-280 Winchester Boulevard Interchange Improvements Project. My name is Deanna Bolio, and I work in BTA Community Outreach. I will be acting as the facilitator this evening. We would typically be in a community center or a classroom for a meeting like this one, but we're conducting this meeting virtually in compliance with our local shelter-in-place orders. So we thank you for spending your time this evening with us. And I'd like you to please note that this meeting is being recorded. Next slide. I will introduce our project team, take you through our agenda for the evening, and provide some logistical details about how this virtual meeting is going to work. I'll start with an introduction of our team. We have Jean Gonzalo, VTA Capital Program Manager, Ann Kalman, VTA Environmental Programs Manager, Chris Lilly, VTA Project Manager, Zahir Gulzada, City of San Jose Department of Transportation, Brian Gassner, Charles Winter, and Caltrans Office of Environmental Analysis. This meeting will begin with a presentation by staff about the proposed project and the environmental review process. A question and answer session will follow. Your microphones will be muted throughout the presentation. Please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen to type questions, and these questions will be read aloud and answered at the end of the presentation. In general, we'll take questions in the order they were asked, but questions along a similar theme may be asked and answered together. The scoping meeting will last approximately an hour. And like I said at the beginning, this presentation will be recorded and posted online for those who aren't here tonight. Please give us 48 hours to post that recording. And there are two ways to ask questions. There's using the Q&A feature or by raising your hand. We strongly encourage people to use the Q&A box located at the bottom of your screen. Some of you will likely have the same question and you'll be able to see that it's already been asked. And you can also ask the question verbally by clicking the raise your hand button. You will be called on. I will ask you to accept the unmute and you'll be able to ask your question. To make the most of our limited time, we do ask that verbal comments be limited to 1 minute. If you are using your phone to call into the meeting and not using the Zoom platform, you can raise your hand by pressing *9. We'll call on you by the last 4 digits of your phone number. And with that, we'll get this presentation started. Here's Ann to talk about the purpose of this meeting and why we are here tonight.
Thank you, Deanna. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for attending this scoping meeting for the proposed 280 Winchester Boulevard Interchange Improvements Project. I am going to begin with the purpose of the scoping meeting. I will be followed by Chris Lilly, who will describe the transportation challenges that Caltrans and BTA are focusing on in the project area. In other words, the need for the project. Chris will then describe the proposed conceptual project to address those transportation challenges, which is the purpose of the project. I will follow Chris with an overview of the environmental review process and schedule and describe how to submit scoping comments. Caltrans, in cooperation with BTA and the City of San Jose, will prepare an environmental impact report, or EIR, for the proposed project in accordance with the requirements of the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA. We will also prepare an environmental assessment, or EA, in accordance with the requirements of the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. Therefore, the project will be analyzed both under state and federal environmental laws and regulations in a joint EIR-EA document. Caltrans is the lead agency for both the EIR and EA. The purpose of the scoping meeting, which occurs early in the environmental review process, is to provide information about the proposed project and for Caltrans, BTA, and the city to receive feedback from other agencies and the public on the need for the project, the purpose of the project, possible viable alternatives that address the purpose and need, the environmental analysis methodology, the environmental issues to be studied, and any foreseeable potential environmental effects of the proposed project. Scoping helps the lead agency understand the issues of concern and the issues that may be of lesser concern. We understand that people who live and/or work in the project area may have unique knowledge of any issues of concern. Therefore, your input during the 30-day scoping period is extremely valuable. Next, Chris will describe the existing conditions in the project area, the purpose and need for improvements that address the existing conditions, and finally, he will walk us through the proposed project.
Thanks, Ann. The project is focused on the segment of I-280 through the 280, 880, 17 interchange and the Winchester Boulevard 280 interchange. Currently at Winchester Boulevard, only a northbound on-ramp and a southbound off-ramp connect the freeway system to the project area. This means that virtually all of the traffic from southbound 880, northbound 17, and northbound 280 with destinations in the project area must utilize the Stevens Creek Boulevard interchange and traverse the short segment of Stevens Creek Boulevard west of I-880. The proposed improvements are mostly in the northwest quadrant of the 880, 280, 17 interchange, with an emphasis on providing an alternate local access from the freeway system to the area south of Stevens Creek Boulevard and west of I-880 and Route 17. Some common destinations near the project location include the Santana Row mixed-use development, the Valley Fair Shopping Center, and the Winchester Mystery House. Next slide, please. The site constraints that are present within the project limits include northbound 280, the on-ramp, northbound 280 on-ramps and southbound 880, and from northbound 17 that are closely spaced. This constraint is likely the reason that not all the northbound movements were accommodated at the Winchester Boulevard 280 interchange as it exists today. Areas just outside the Caltrans right-of-way and within the project area are typically fully developed residential and commercial properties, concepts that would have required substantial right-of-way acquisition and numerous displacements were removed from further consideration. The city of San Jose has invested significant time and resources to develop bicycle facilities along Monroe Street to provide north-south connectivity in this portion of the city and across the 280 corridor. City staff have expressed the need to maintain and improve that connectivity. The last project constraint that I'd like to highlight is the need to respect Frank Santana Park as a resource for residents. The park is utilized by local residents for soccer, softball, youth baseball, walking, running, pet exercise, and other outdoor activities. Designing the 280 Winchester improvements such that the project will not adversely affect the activities, features, or main attributes of the park is a project goal. The project is being developed with input from the City of San Jose's Parks, Recreation, and Neighborhood Services Department to help achieve that goal. Next slide, please. The project team has utilized big data sources such as Streetlight. The Streetlight software anonymizes 40 billion location records from smartphones and navigation devices that are connected to cars and trucks. That information was used to identify travel patterns and inform the development of the proposed build alternative. This Streetlight data shows that approximately 60% of the traffic from northbound I-280 with destinations in the project area are destined for locations north of I-280, and approximately 40% of those trips have destinations south of I-280. The data also indicates that Saturday traffic patterns trend more towards retail destinations north of I-280, with about 50% of northbound 280 traffic having destinations in the project area on Saturdays have those retail business destinations. Next slide, please. With that background information on the current situation, the purpose of the proposed project is to improve traffic operations and reduce congestion on the local roadways in the project area, improve bicycle and pedestrian access and transit connectivity in the project area, and improve access from I-280 to the project area. I would like to mention that the improvements that are proposed as this part of the project were initially slated to be included in the I-880 Stevens Creek Boulevard interchange project. However, because of schedule and funding constraints, needed to be separated out into a separate project, this proposed project. Next slide, please. Congestion and increased travel times along Stevens Creek and Winchester Boulevard corridors were common occurrences before this year. Traffic volumes on Winchester Boulevard and Stevens Creek Boulevard increased by almost 15% from 2012 to 2017. Traffic demand at the I-880 Stevens Creek interchange is expected to grow by another 20% by 2040 and will likely exceed the capacity of that facility before that time. Substantial residential and commercial growth in the project area, including several expansions of the Santana Row mixed-use development, the Westfield Valley Fair Shopping Center, and planned developments such as the Santana Row Valley Fair Urban Village, the Winchester Urban Village, and Stevens Creek Urban Villages will all continue to increase travel demand for the project area. Additional residential and commercial developments are planned in the area, and regional growth is anticipated to increase this future travel demand. Because no direct access from northbound I-280 to the project exists today, nearly all of the traffic from northbound 280 destined for areas south of Stevens Creek Boulevard, and even traffic headed to locations south of I-280, is forced to use the I-880 Stevens Creek Boulevard interchange. That traffic must then maneuver through several local streets and intersections to get to the project area. This adds traffic to the already congested Stevens Creek Boulevard and nearby neighborhood streets, and also Winchester Boulevard. Last but not least, there is insufficient multimodal access and active transportation connectivity within the project area and adjacent neighborhoods. Winchester Boulevard is heavily traveled by pedestrians and bicyclists, and Winchester Boulevard is also classified as a high caution facility on the Santa Clara Valley Bikeways map, which indicates the need for better facilities. Now I'd like to walk through the concept in detail. The build alternative features a new off-ramp from northbound 280 to the project area, and specifically to the Tisch Way Hatton Street intersection. The advantage of providing this new off-ramp is that it would remove traffic from Stevens Creek Boulevard that wants to access the areas south of Stevens Creek Boulevard, and more specifically, the areas south of I-280. By allowing a portion of the traffic to use this proposed ramp, the volumes for Stevens Creek Boulevard and Winchester Boulevard between Stevens Creek and Tisch Way will be reduced. The average trip length on local streets will be reduced to provide more efficient traffic operations on the local street network. The proposed ramp would pass underneath the existing 280-880 separation, with concrete barrier dividing the ramp from the 280 main line. The ramp will also tuck under the southbound 280 to northbound 880 connector. A tunnel under the southbound 880 to northbound 280 connector and Tisch Way will provide local street access while still allowing two-way traffic on Tisch Way adjacent to the new ramp. The Tisch Hatton off-ramp exits the tunnel, then continues in a depressed section along Santana Park and Tisch Way frontage, while transitioning back to the existing street grade at the Tisch Hatton intersection. It is anticipated that there would be impacts to the existing trees along the north side of Tisch Way from Monroe to Hatton along Frank Santana Park frontage. The project also proposes to improve Tisch Way and provide a separated Class 4 bike lane on the south side of Tisch and a widened Class 1 bicycle pedestrian path on the north side of Tisch. The project would improve the publicly owned portion of Hatton Street with sidewalks and turn lanes. Hatton becomes a private road near the recently constructed parking garage, and improvements on the privately owned road are not included in the project. The existing pedestrian overcrossing of I-280 at Monroe Street would conflict with the proposed Tisch Hatton off-ramp and would be replaced with a new pedestrian overcrossing approximately 3/4 of a block to the west of the existing pedestrian overcrossing. The project proposes to remove the existing northbound 17 to northbound 280 loop ramp and replaces it with a flyover direct connector. The connector would provide for higher travel speeds, reduced travel times, and enters 280 in its own lane rather than merging into mainline 280 traffic. The new connector would also improve the ability to meter traffic entering northbound 280 if needed. The existing northbound 17 to northbound 280 ramp conflicts with the proposed Tisch Way Hatton Street off-ramp, and as mentioned earlier, would be removed. Lastly, The project proposes to widen the existing Winchester Boulevard overcrossing to provide better connectivity to transit, better facilities for active transportation travel modes, both bicycle and pedestrian. That completes a summary of the proposed improvements, and I'd like to hand it back to Ann to talk more about the specifics of the environmental review process being started.
Thank you, Chris. The environmental review process for the proposed 280 Winchester Boulevard Interchange Improvements Project is driven more by the requirements under CEQA for an EIR rather than the requirements of an EA under NEPA, as there are more formalized steps under CEQA for an EIR. Under CEQA, the environmental review process begins with the notice of preparation of an EIR, which was issued on September 8th through the State Office of Planning and Research for distribution to various state and regional agencies. The notice was also filed with the County of Santa Clara and distributed in several ways to local agencies, businesses, residents, and other interested stakeholders. The notice of preparation begins the 30-day scoping period, which ends on October 8th. All scoping comments must be received by October 8th. Following scoping, we move to the technical analysis phase. The following lists include the various subject areas addressed in this phase. Air quality and greenhouse gas emissions have become increasingly important topics. Biological resources perhaps less important in an urban setting such as the project area. Community impacts cover several topics, for example, impacts to private property or impacts to public services, such as emergency response. Traffic and transportation address congestion and multimodal access, and so on. The results of the technical analysis are summarized in the draft EIREA, and the details of the analysis are often included in separate reports that support the information in the draft EIREA. Once the technical analysis is complete, a draft EIREA is prepared and a notice of availability is issued in basically the same manner as the notice of preparation. The notice of availability begins the 45-day public review process for the environmental document. Within that 45-day review period, a public hearing is held to present the results of the environmental analysis. Comments on the draft document are accepted during the 45-day review period, including at the public hearing. All comments received during the 45-day public review process are addressed in the final EIREA, and any changes to the draft document based on the comments are typically shown in the final document through added or strikeout text. Once all the comments are addressed and edits are made to the draft environmental document, the final EIREA is prepared. Caltrans, as the lead agency, approves both the final EIREA and the project by filing a notice of determination with the State Office of Planning and Research and the County of Santa Clara. As mentioned previously, the environmental review process begins with the notice of preparation, which begins the 30-day scoping process. The scoping process for the proposed project ends on October 8th. Following scoping, we anticipate that the technical analysis and preparation of the draft EIREA will take us to early 2022, at which time we will release the draft environmental document for review and comment and hold a public hearing. Once we conclude that process, several months later, the final environmental document will be available. Caltrans ultimately approves the final environmental document and the project as described in the final EIREA. The design of the project will take an additional 2 years. Construction is anticipated to begin in 2025 and last until 2027. Scoping comments may be sent by either email or postal mail so that Caltrans and VTA have a written record of the comments. We will return to the screen at the end of the Q&A portion of this meeting to enable you the opportunity to write this information down. This information is also included in the materials that were sent out for this meeting and on the project webpage on VTA's website bta.org. As a reminder, scope and comments are due no later than October 8th to inform the environmental review process.